am joined now by two guests for the rest of the program to give their perspective on the talking points here on Arise Primetime. Oluwole Osaze Uzi is a lawyer and former Director of Voter Education and Publicity at Nigeria's Independent National Electoral Commission. And Waziri Adio is a journalist of rather big repute. He's also a policy strategist and an Arise News analyst. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Good evening.
And I'll start with you for obvious reasons, because obviously you were connected, and perhaps still are in some ways, to INEC. Mr. Peterside has done an absolutely mammoth job in getting 15 million people registered.
Well, Mr. Peterside and a host of a lot of other Nigerians.
Well, he did say that.
Good. A lot of other Nigerians.
Yes.
Have galvanized the populace. I don't think it's attributed to any particular group, persons, or anything like that. I think there's an awareness, and he, in his analysis, was quite forthright that they've done their own bit. A lot of people have done their own bit, but the people driving this are the youths themselves. And I think I tend to agree with him that arising from the ashes of the failed, and I said failed guardedly, the failed uprising following the NSAS protest movements, upheaval, revolution, call it what you want to. I think there was a realization, a new consciousness that, look, yes, this one we may have failed in this way, it might have been hijacked in this way, but there's some other way we can go to change and alter things. And if you recall,
in other words, a greater sense of the power, the potential of the power.
Absolutely. I think they saw the power. It's almost like a volcano that was about to erupt, and they saw the rhythm, the power there was there. And how else can we channel these energies? How else can we use this power to ensure that we bring about some change or desired change? It's not just by waking up to end SARS. There's a 10-point agenda, which included end police brutality, but it was like, can we harmonize this? And I think it raised consciousness, not just those on the front lines, not just those at the barricades, not just those at the Lekki toll gate, but a lot of youths on social media all around the world, especially Nigerians in the diaspora, the youths all around the country said, look, maybe there's time we can use our power and use it more positively. I think it was almost a leadership-less movement.
Yes, it was.
But there's a realization that if we are coordinated and if we try from within, entering the system, maybe we can make a change, we can make a difference. I think that gave a lot of fillip, that gave a lot of enthusiasm to the whole thing. And I think that's coupled with the fact that there are, as Mr. Peterside did mention, there are one or two people who've gingered, who they can look up to. They don't do things of the past. A lot of them feel we're tired of the things of the past. Let us see whether there's a new horizon, somebody who's going to take us to that new horizon. I think one or two of the candidates have also gingered that as well. So it's a lot of factors, but these are some of the factors I think that have encouraged that surge in the number of new registrants coming on board.
Well, I couldn't have put it better myself. And Waziri Adio, of course, getting people to register is only a tiny part of the job, isn't it? I mean, the real challenge is to get people to brave all the difficult conditions under which voting takes place, standing under the blazing sun for countless hours waiting to cast their vote, voting materials delivered late, machines failing to function. And of course, it can also be dangerous with gunshots and violence at polling stations.
Okay, it's true. Getting registered is the first step, very important step. You can't win the lottery without buying the ticket.
That's a good point.
So
I do play the lottery from time to time.
Good for you. So it's a very critical step. We need to acknowledge that. But there are also some other more critical or more important steps. You get registered. You need to complete the process. It's not everybody that initiated the process that has completed it.
And that's a very significant point.
The second one, building on that, is you need to pick up your actual cards and you need to turn up on the day of the election. And beyond that, yes, election, the battle for good governance is a marathon, is not a sprint. It doesn't even, as important as elections are, it doesn't end with the election. The responsibility of citizens is ongoing.
Yes.
It's an eternal battle, right? So even after people have registered, have picked up their cards, have voted, the task of engaging with government, even when you get the government that you want, you can't go to sleep. And this is not peculiar to Nigeria. Especially in Nigeria, we need people to be more engaged. All over the world, people are tuning out. It's not just a Nigerian thing. If you look at voters' turnout across the world, it's actually dipping. What is going on now is that people have expressed interest. There's more enthusiasm. There are many factors at play. And we need to interrogate some of these factors, even some of the data being thrown around. You know, as far as I'm concerned, is INEC that registers voters. It's not like people, civil society groups. You know, they have done a very important job in mobilizing people
yes, that's
to
what
go
they
out.
do, basically.
But it's INEC that does the actual registration. So we need to get that framing right. Because if you say, oh, we have registered 15 million people, then registered in what capacity?
Yeah, well, helps to register.
Yes, you know, and a lot is going on in terms of sensitizing people, in terms of mobilizing them, in terms of also the youth discovering their voice and their agency, and being ready to play a greater role in their own fortunes or in how their country is governed.
And I think that's some key points that Mr. Adio made there. Beyond all of that, many people feel that their votes may simply not count, even after they've defied all the obstacles. There may still be rigging of the election. I mean, which could waste all their efforts. Is there? Do you share that hope that with digitized votes, which will be in use in the 2023 elections, it should be more difficult to manipulate election results and alter the figures?
I don't share the sense of cynicism or pessimism. I don't know what word is more appropriate, but
well, the cynicism comes from the fact that virtually every election in Nigeria, people have complained that their votes didn't count. I mean,
yes, with varying degrees of correctness or otherwise,
right.
varying degrees. I don't get that sense that people who are queuing out there, spending hours on end to get their PVCs, believe that their votes will not count. On the contrary, I think a lot of them are prepared to make that sacrifice in the understanding and belief that their votes will count.
Yeah, but the issue there, which I think was raised by Mr. Peterside, is that there's still the issue of corruption, that people selling their PVCs to politicians, choosing the immediate gratification of a few thousand naira rather than the electoral promises that they think may never be fulfilled. So those people, I mean, I'm not saying all of them, but obviously some of them stand there and take the money and, stand in the hot sun.
I'd like to believe that, yes, you're quite right, some of them will do that, but I would like to believe that the vast majority of people queuing out there to get their PVCs now are not the type of people who are going to sell their votes. The enthusiasm, the passion that you have for lots of people, especially these new registrants, the passion you're seeing in them, those don't appear to be the kind of people who will go and be induced and be bribed for 5,000 or even 10,000 naira to sell your votes. A lot of them, if you have watched quite a number of your interviews of young people queuing there and say, look, no, already if you go to social media, you see so many volunteers, and Mr. Peterside made allusions to that. There are so many volunteers in different spheres of mobilizing people, going there, getting PVCs and things. Unfortunately, we saw in Ekiti that, yes, voter inducement, by the way, it's nothing new at all.
Yes.
It takes different facets. Don't forget those days we had 50 naira bags of salt, we had a sandwich, 50 naira sandwich in bread and things like that. So it takes different forms. Now they call it see and buy, you collect cash, but you had gifts of salt, Maggi, and stuff like that, seasonings just for the sake of votes. So you've always had that. It takes different variants. And because there's a value to that, there'll be other people, there'll be a black market, quote unquote. There'll always be a black market for it. There'll always be people who are prepared to induce others. It's I don't want to say it's a Nigerian thing, because bribery is not a Nigerian word. It's been there amongst all these people, and we go to the history of England, the history of the US. bribery has been at different stages in their democratic life.
That is
been
true.
Prevalent in different ways. So that will be there. We cannot rule that it will be utopian to say that no, people will
But
not
hopefully with
say
each successive election, it becomes less and
yes,
less.
and people now realize that you probably have to do a lot more than just bribe people
Right.
to come out and vote for you.
Gentlemen, thank you, but stay with us. You're watching Arise Prime Time. Plenty more still ahead as we cast to a completely different subject, the shattering ordeal of insecurity in Nigeria and what to do about it. Stay with us. Welcome back to Arise Prime Time, where we speak to the newsmakers around the world. I'm Charles Anyegolu. Let's take a look at some of the stories that are making news globally. Here in Nigeria, a third Catholic priest has been kidnapped in Kaduna State in the northwest amid a spate of similar incidents. On Saturday, 2 Catholic priests were abducted in the southern state of Edo, and last week a priest was taken from his home near the city of Auchi, also in Edo State, and was later found dead. As you will hear on this program, the security services in Nigeria are struggling to combat an upsurge in criminal killings and kidnappings for ransom across the country. The World Health Organization says the outbreak of the Ebola virus that erupted in the Democratic Republic of Congo in April is now over. Local health emergency teams have been praised for their swift response. In Ukraine, the governor of the occupied Luhansk region says Ukrainian troops are continuing to fight Russian forces from fortified positions further west. Serhiy Haidai was speaking after the Ukrainians pulled out of Lysychansk. Correspondents say the Russians now have a clear foothold in eastern Ukraine, which is likely to make their push into the rest of the Donbass easier. Meanwhile, at a donor conference in Switzerland, the Ukrainian Prime Minister has put the price tag for the reconstruction of Ukraine at $750 billion. And in sports, the African Women's Cup of Nations, which is currently underway in Morocco, with the ultra champions Nigeria taking on their dangerous rival South Africa. And the outcome is not good for Nigeria. It appears they lost 2-1 to South Africa. And you're watching Arise Prime Time with me, Charles Anyegolu. Now, as we mentioned at the outset, one of the most fundamental questions in Nigeria today is, how do you make life safer for the people who live here? And that question is being asked with particular poignancy and urgency right now after the recent killings of people in various parts of the country and with the presidential elections fast approaching. Well, one of the presidential candidates in that ballot, Atiku Abubakar of the main opposition People's Democratic Party, has been speaking to This Day newspaper about the importance of justice and accountability for the crimes that have shattered the foundations of security in Nigeria. Mr. Atiku spoke of the need to hold to account the perpetrators of such crimes as a way of making sure the incidents don't happen again. The reason they keep repeating, he said, is because culprits from previous incidents have been left unpunished. Mr. Atiku also said that if he became president, he would listen to the military to understand their strengths and weaknesses and provide them with everything they need. And still with me in the studio, giving their perspective on the talking points here on Arise Prime Time, Oluwole Osaze Uzi, lawyer and former director of voter education and publicity at Nigeria's Independent National Electoral Commission, and Waziri Adio, renowned journalist, policy strategist, and Arise News analyst. And I'm delighted to say that we're also joined on the line by the respected security analyst and CEO of the security firm Beacon Consulting, Dr. Kabiru Adamu. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for staying with us, and of course Kabiru for joining us. Let me start with you, Dr. Adamu. What's your assessment of what Mr. Atiku Abubakar has had to say about the persistence of insecurity in Nigeria and how to deal with it?
Thank you, Charles, and welcome back. We've missed you for some time.
Well, it's jolly nice of you to say so.
On a lighter note, it appears Atiku's team has been listening to my perspective on security, because I have consistently repeated that part of the reason why we haven't seen an improvement in our security sector is this lack of accountability and responsiveness by security organizations. Things happen. A train gets hijacked, passengers are abducted, a church is attacked, and not a single security official is held accountable for those acts. So to that extent, I agree with the flag bearer of the People's Democratic Party, the main opposition party. However, it's his solution to countering that challenge that I do not think is the right approach to it. He's mentioned that he will listen to the military. Now, the military are a component of that security department. And frankly, to be fair to this administration, they have invested heavily in the military. In fact, if we pick the Air Force, it would be very difficult to look back at our history and say there has been any government, any administration that has invested in the Air Force and the military in the manner that this administration has done. They've got platforms that are enviable across the world. They've got platforms that are at a level that is comparable to any African country that is good, that has a good military disposition. So to that extent, I do not think it's an issue of resources. I am an advocate that we need to look at the aspect of auditing as well as monitoring and evaluation. How do we improve the kind of oversight within our military and security sector to make them amenable to our democracy, so that they understand that the ethos of their functions is the protection of the human being as well as the property of that human being. That is the kind of narrative I'm expecting to hear from politicians going into 2023.
Well, thanks for setting that out for us, Dr. Adamu. And let me come to you, Waziri Adio. Is there a political context in which Mr. Atiku has been speaking and that has informed what he said, or is he simply reacting as a concerned presidential candidate, do you think?
Well, I think insecurity is going to be a major issue in the 2023 election for very obvious reasons. I guess it's just trying out what is both his prognosis and is what he thinks should be done. He's trying to try it out. Yes, he says something about need for consequence management, and that is very on point. You need to actions should have consequences, and if actions do not have consequences, what that breeds is impunity, right? And that's kind of encourages people to continue. There's something in security circles that they call the broken window theory, broken windows theory. You have something little, you don't attend to it, then it escalates. About 10 years ago, people were talking about some unrest in Zamfara. He had not become what it is today. So definitely making sure that when something happens, you attend to it very quickly is very important. But beyond that, we also need to acknowledge, it's not for want of trying. I think what is missing for now, in my own estimation, is that we're still approaching this as if we're fighting a conventional war. This is asymmetrical warfare, and whether you call them bandits or terrorists or whatever you call them, is that the way they operate is not the way the conventional enemy operates. So they try to catch you by surprise. So we need to, I'm not too sure that is an area where we have enough expertise or where we have developed enough expertise over time. So we need to look at how we approach this whole thing about insecurity and find a different way of approaching it. So it's not just about throwing money at the problem. Yes, we're buying assets, and all of that. But we need to think about how do we approach this? And we need to put all the options on the table. Sometimes we're looking at issues of pride. There are some countries and some groups that have more expertise, who have more, expertise on this, that, us. We need to. If we need to bring in, mercenaries, Nigerians do not care. What they want to do is that they want to be safer.
Absolutely.
They want to feel safer, so that they can do, whatever they need to do. So, I guess we're going to hear more of this from all the candidates, during the campaigns, and all kind of ideas will be out there. And I also think it's very important to interrogate the ideas to see, which one is worth taking forward,
which is what we're trying to do at the moment, because Mr. Uzi, one of the candidates, has come out to sort of show a bit of his hand and what he might intend to do. If Atiku, I suppose you could say that's a hypothetical question to some extent, but if Atiku wins the election, is it your sense that we could see significant change with regard to things like insecurity? In other words, change in approach, even if that approach is not necessarily successful? Or is there not a lot of room for that kind of change? Because, will it be like for example, electricity conundrum that has flawed successive governments in Nigeria?
I think that is the biggest challenge. We used that word earlier on. There's almost a cynicism about politicians speak, It's like we've been there before. It's almost deja vu. They've always said this. 7 years ago, some people came and said there'll be change, and change was the mantra. Fundamentally, have there been changes in our approach to things? I think if you ask the average Nigerian now, probably not. If anything else, using many indices, it's been a change for the worse. But some people go back to look. 1999 to 2007, was it not the same approach we took? And at that time, the candidate now, presidential candidate now, was vice president, and he had an opportunity then to put some of these things to test. What did he actually do? Admittedly, the dimensions of the conflict now are different from what they were, and as Zadio says, things have changed quite a bit. There was unrestiveness. It's the roots of the unrestiveness were actually there at that time, but it escalated. It went deeper and wider, much broader. So whereas we were thinking, for example, by the time of 2007, we were thinking more just of the Niger Delta and the extreme northeast of Boko Haram, but the roots were planted then because of this impunity and the lack of punishment in anything you do. Once there's some kind of reward and no punishment or minimal punishment, when you weigh the two things and say the reward is much better than the punishment, then it's likely to continue and to escalate, and that's exactly what has happened. I don't know for the average Nigerian whether there's a hope, but at the same time, and I hope we will not be clutching at straws to think that we'll latch onto every word the politician says. But in practical terms, let's go deeper. How do you want to do it? It's nice sounding, nice sound bites. Oh, we'll listen to the military. We'll listen to them more. The impression is that, well, maybe they're not listening to the military commanders now. But a lot of people in 2015 said, look, this man is a general. He's been a commanding officer. He did whatever he did against Maitatsini in the 80s. So we believe that in security, we will get some kind of resounding victory against those who threatened our sovereignty at that time. But sadly, it hasn't happened. So we're careful. We don't know. Let us hear a lot more in terms of how you intend to do it. It's easier to say words, but
I think that's
how
a
do you
good
intend
point. That's a very good point. And let me come back to you, Dr. Kabiru Adamu. I want to thank you very much indeed for patiently staying there and listening to the rest of us. Of course, we could spend, and we are spending, a lot of time talking about what may happen and should happen with security in Nigeria. But in the meantime, Nigeria is still clearly consumed by insecurity, and many lives across this country have been broken by it, and many have to live with the dreadful, almost inexpungible memory of it.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's the situation. So I've got a dashboard on my consultancy. We call it the incident tracker. And, we use red and other colors to depict, security incidents. And every time there's an incident and I see those colors flashing, the realization hits me that that's somebody's life, parents, children that have been affected. And today, those reds, flashed in several parts of the country. So indeed, unfortunately, things are not going very well in the area of security in Nigeria, and understandably that security or the lack of it is a major issue in ahead of the 2023 elections.
And let me stay with you, Dr. Kabiru Adamu, because you are, of course, a respected security expert. I mean, how do you make life safer for the people who live in Nigeria?
Well, as a private practitioner, I do not have control over resources, so I use my intellect, my understanding of security, and it's pretty simple. We have this acronym that we say awareness leads to anticipation, and then anticipation leads to mitigation. So what we do is to help people be aware in different aspects of life. In corporate security management, we call it enterprise security risk management, where we help corporate businesses, organizations realize, understand what their risks are, and by understanding the risk, you are able to anticipate the consequences of that risk. And then more importantly, you are able to put forward mitigation measures. Now, if we use the elections as an example that are coming up, what are the likely risks to face the elections from the point of view of the INEC as the umpire, the point of view of a voter, or individuals who perhaps for one reason or the other are either observers or they're just monitoring the elections, or they're average Nigerian who for one reason or the other is not in any of these categories. So for each of this, we identify likely risks. We make them anticipate what these risks would be. And then, of course, we put in place mitigation measures. Now, the challenge in Nigeria is that the public security departments that are supposed to provide the very basis for security, unfortunately, sometimes are the reasons for the insecurity. So it's a very difficult task in Nigeria, especially if you have to tell someone that, look, this is the person holding the gun who is meant to protect you, can sometimes be the reason for insecurity in a particular area. As an example, during the elections, we know there are 3 concentric cycles of security during the elections. Now, in the last concentric cycle, no one is supposed to bear a weapon. One of the things we do is to make our clients aware. If you go to that last concentric cycle and you see anyone holding a weapon, it's not a normal situation. It means there could be danger. So perhaps either you leave or you call a particular security agent to come to that location and see what they can do. So these are the ways we support security management in the country.
Okay, well, stay with us, Dr. Kabiru, as well as the 2 other guests here, because we want to talk a little bit more from a different angle about this security issue. Let's go to northern Nigeria, where Zamfara state has taken dramatic steps to try to end the increasing number of kidnappings and violent deaths there. As you may have heard, it's authorized people to buy guns to defend themselves against criminal gangs. And the governor of Zamfara state also ordered the closure of markets in some districts and banned the use of taxi motorcycles known as Okada and the sale of petrol to the bike operators. Police have also been ordered to shoot anyone violating the Okada ban. And still with me, giving their perspective on the big talking point of insecurity in Nigeria and how to deal with it, the respected security analyst and CEO of the security firm Beacon Consulting, Dr. Kabiru Adamu, the journalist, policy strategist and Arise News analyst, Waziru Adio, and the lawyer and former director of voter education and publicity at Nigeria's Independent Electoral Commission. We're in the dying moments of this discussion. So, gentlemen, if I could ask you to keep your answers exceedingly short. Let me come to you, Waziri Adio. It's now about a week or so since the governor of Zamfara state told citizens to arm themselves. How do you assess the reaction to it a week later?
Well,
briefly.
It's difficult to know, but I think that's a very dangerous dimension. Asking people to harm themselves, it's a sign of just saying, we're no longer in control. You are your own. So take charge of your own, and that doesn't come across well.
Okay,
Like
I'm really sorry about this, but I think I sort of gobbled up a bit more time because you guys were just so exciting talking with you. We're going to have to end the program here, but I want to thank all of you very much indeed for joining us today. That's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Do join us again tomorrow from the entire team here in Abuja. Bye-bye, and thank you for watching.